I've realized more and more how important the networks of relationships are in shaping people's opinions and beliefs and behaviors. It seems a very natural driver of people's outcomes in terms of understanding inequality. I'm Matthew Jackson. I'm a professor of economics at Stanford University. I've became interested in networks, I guess, almost 30 years ago. A conversation with a friend with Asher Belinsky about how people gain power and dynamics in networks. And so we started thinking about this from an economist's point of view, where people are making choices of people they're connecting with. And over the years, I've realized more and more how important the networks of relationships are in shaping people's opinions and beliefs and behaviors. It seems a very natural driver of people's outcomes in terms of understanding inequality. So if you want to understand why some people end up at university and other people don't, or why people end up in different jobs, taking account of their circumstances and their communities and the people that they're surrounded by is vital. Economic connectedness, what we started looking at was trying to understand how social capital explains economic mobility. So how do people's connections affect their future outcomes? There's many different ways to measure social capital. So is it, how many connections I have, or how well connected my friends are and how tightly knit the group is? Economic connectedness is a measure of social capital which actually looks at the demographics of my connections. So if I'm relatively poor, are most of my friends poor, or do I have some rich friends? So it's looking at the economic composition of my network. And it turns out that when we look at the data, that composition of my network is a much more important predictor of people's potential to rise out of poverty than other aspects of the network. So it seemed to be the dominant one when we looked at how explanatory these different notions of social capital are. The work that I'm presenting here today is a follow-up work with Raj, which is trying to understand why it is that people end up in certain communities. So if people are choosing the communities and choosing the exposure that they're going to have, why is it that poor people might end up staying in a poor community rather than moving to a wealthier community? What kinds of policies would help incentivize people to move and to help their children? So it's trying to put together the understanding that we have from what we observe in the data to try and understand how to better design policies that help integrate the networks and produce more economic connectedness, and what are the frictions that people have to overcome. In fact, two things on that. So one, there's a follow-up work by some of the authors on the original and some others from Facebook who are looking at UK data, and they're finding some overlap and then some differences. So there's interesting things that come out in the, when you're looking at other countries. I've also been involved in a project through Santa Fe Institute, what's called the Endow Project, where we're looking at 58 different small-scale societies around the world, and they're spread completely around the globe. And there we're also looking at economic connectedness and how it affects inequality in those, and we find it to be a strong predictor there. So you can actually see patterns, how these kinds of social capital network patterns affect things differently in different parts of the world, but the same measures seem to pop up over and over, but they do have different signatures and different data. So that's something that we'll continue to understand over time. I think it's sort of a golden age now of availability of data. It also can help us guide theory, which can help us understand policy. The sets of questions that are out there now, especially about social interactions, social patterns, there's so much more data that's available, and it can help us unpack these sort of basic, long-standing issues in ways that haven't been possible in the past. With the combination of data, computing power, and bringing theory to bear on these things can help us understand the drivers in new ways. So it's a very exciting time to be doing this kind of research.
Sciences Po.